Hey everyone, welcome back to So Arizona. Today we are doing a February garden tour. It's been a month since I checked in with you, so I wanted to show you what is ready to harvest, what is finished, and what my plans are moving forward for the next month. As you can see behind me, I've got some brassicas in bloom, which is such a welcome change from the very green and lush winter garden. Now I love winter gardening. It's such a nice break from the summer heat and the sun. I love how lush and green it is, but the garden is definitely missing its summer color. So it's really nice this early spring to have splashes of color here in the garden. There is an old raven cackling from the top of an old cypress tree in my yard. So if you hear him croaking, that's what it is. Let me see if I can give you a peek. That old raven has a mate, I think, who likes to get on top of the other cypress tree, and together they hold morning council and have all kinds of things to discuss. So if you hear him in the background, that is what is happening. It is the morning meeting. So as I was saying, the plant behind me is broccoli rabe. I love letting things go to flower in the late winter and early spring because it adds such a pop of color after a very long winter of just solid green. And that green is very lush and beautiful, but I am definitely ready for some color in the garden. And another reason is that it provides food for the early arriving pollinators like the honeybees and the native bees that I've seen on this plant. And the third reason is that as they do their work, they are pollinating those flowers, and I will get free seeds to collect that are very well adapted to my yard when they're finished. They do the good work of pollinating and providing seeds that I can save that are well adapted to my yard and are free so that I don't have to buy more seeds next year. So of course, these are things that are open pollinated or heirloom type varieties, not hybrids. And the seeds that these flowers will produce are going to grow true to the type that I am expecting. So I can't wait to be collecting those. I am in my stock tank garden, and we enjoyed this arugula for a couple of months. As you can see, these plants are starting to flower, but they are going to provide seeds for me. And I'm also going to sneak some of those flowers to put on my salads because they are beautiful and they taste like arugula too. These arugula leaves are no longer edible. They're very spicy and a little bit bitter, but the flowers still have that nice arugula flavor without the fire. Just in case you've never grown broccoli rabe before, it kind of looks a little bit like broccoli, only on these single stems, and these are very tender. You can cook them and eat them, and it is a great fast food from the garden when you don't have time or don't want to wait for the broccoli to mature. I took a long 3-day weekend up in Phoenix just to check out some places that I hadn't seen before, and just in that matter of time, this broccoli rabe went from the perfect edible stage to flowering, and I was greeted by the hum of honeybees and native bees all over these flowers when I returned. So I couldn't be upset about the fact that I missed the window on harvesting a little more broccoli rabe because they were so sweet, and I'm gonna get the free seeds like I talked about, so I can't complain about that. I've been talking a little bit about having to cover these nasturtiums in this stock tank with frost cloth for quite a few weeks because it had gotten to below freezing in my yard, and I was really trying to preserve them. They can be quite frost sensitive, and I want to harvest the leaves and the flowers for salads as the weather warms, so I really wanted to try to preserve them from any frost damage, and it looks like I was successful, and they are looking so beautiful. And I just noticed that I have my very first nasturtium bloom for quite some time, and so I think I'm going to leave that for the bees for now, but I will certainly be getting my share for my salads. Also in this tub, I have let some lettuce go to flower, and that's because I really enjoyed this variety. I wanted to save the seeds from it. Really, my goal as of late is to save more seeds and share more and plant more and buy less. So I'm letting these just go to flower, and as I said before, the pollinators will really appreciate these when they open, and they are so close. I think this one is beautiful. Look at those red tinged edges on those leaves. I tucked in a few leftover tiara cabbages amongst the nasturtium and the lettuce in the stock tank, and it looks like looks like they are beginning to form heads. So these are pretty fast maturing because they're very small cabbages, about the size of a softball. So they will not have any trouble maturing before it gets too warm. Y'all, I have got beets growing everywhere. I love beets. I love to roast them and put them on my salads. I love to juice them for juice in the morning with breakfast. I just love them so much. And that's so funny because when I was a kid, they were one of my most hated foods. I've shared before, I would complain to my mom and tell her I didn't want to eat them because they tasted like dirt, but I don't think that anymore. I think I was just getting some beets that maybe didn't have very good flavor. I think the ones from the grocery store have been sitting around for a while and their flavor is just not even comparable to a fresh beet pulled from the garden. I may be a little obsessed with these beets, but I've got some in my stock tanks, a lot in my stock tanks, okay? And oh, look at that Swiss chard. Gosh, that is just the prettiest little plant. I do have beets planted in 2 of my stock tanks, and I have been eating the tops as well as the bottom. I love growing plants that allow you to use the entire thing and not waste any of it. So I roast the beets, and then the tops I will chop up, blanch in some salted boiling water, and use them as spinach after that. So when you first pick the beet green, they are a little thicker than spinach and can be a little leathery, I think. But if you blanch it, then it becomes as tender as spinach, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference, really, because the flavor is very similar. Since we're on the topic of beets, I'm going to show you the long row of beets I have growing over here. This row is the row that I have my cattle panel trellis on. It's a very affordable option. I got these cattle panel trellises, and my husband helped me attach them to T-posts, and they are just permanently installed, and they do such a great job for pretty much anything. So I've got peas right now that are going all the way down. I've also planted a few tomatoes in here, being a little bit risky, definitely having to check on the nighttime temperatures for these, just to make sure it doesn't get too cold because it's still quite early, but it's been so unseasonably warm during the day and will be for the next couple weeks that I think they'll be all right. So those are going to be growing in front. Then the peas will grow up the trellis in the back, and then all along in the front I have beautiful beets of different variety. So this combination of peas, tomatoes, and beets goes all the way along. This is a 28-foot row, so I certainly hope that I will be getting a lot of beets to satisfy my craving. The last 2 seasons I've grown a dried pole bean on this cattle panel trellis. This year I'm experimenting with planting tomatoes in here instead. So my hope is that by the time the tomatoes get big enough, those peas will be finished, and then I can use the cattle panel to attach the tomato plants to as a nice sturdy support. And then along the back of the bed I'm going to be planting my squash and pumpkins, at least some of them, because they can then vine and crawl to their heart's content and not overtake any of the other plants, because all I have growing back here are fig trees, so I think they'll be just fine with the squash plants. As we take an initial walk through the garden, you can see what I mean when I say that it is quite green. I have lots of brassicas going that will be quickly cleared out to accommodate the warmer season crops that I need to go in the ground fairly soon. This year I planted an entire square of just leeks, so I'm hoping those will be done fairly soon. So many great things coming out of the garden right now. Oh, I wanted to show you, I still have my garbanzo beans growing in the spaces between these cabbages, and they are doing really, really well too. I just love how frilly they are. Look at that, like a little fairy plant. These are another attempt to enrich the soil with nitrogen because they are a legume, a nitrogen fixer, and to shade the soil as well. This is, or was, my broccoli bed. I've been harvesting a ton of broccoli out of here. As you can see, that's where the broccoli head was. And I keep these plants in place because they do develop side shoots that I come out and harvest later on. But here is an example of how these plants can develop side shoots. But since this broccoli plant is so puny, I am leaving it for the pollinators as well, with the hopes of being able to harvest some seed. So it won't be long before I can just clear this whole bed out, and I'll just be composting the broccoli plants. I know some people will save the leaves and dehydrate them and put them into soups, but I have got tons of kale and cabbage and lettuce and Swiss chard and other greens, so I'm a little overwhelmed with the greens right now. So the broccoli leaves will be feeding the compost pile, which I don't find wasteful at all because I'm feeding my soil with that compost. So it all returns back and it's a cycle. Just look at these lovely Brussels sprout plants. So at first you might think, oh, that looks like a cabbage, but nope, it's not, because if we look under here, you can see those gorgeous Brussels sprouts forming. And this is also a bed that I had experimented with sowing some clover in as a ground cover. And this clover over here survived the winter. And so I'm hoping that it'll flower and provide some well-deserved food for the pollinators as well. And I'm just going to keep this in here and see at what temperature it starts to kind of fade away. My reason for growing the clover is to feed the soil because it's a legume, so it will fix nitrogen. When and if I decide to chop that clover down, I will leave the roots in place. I will probably just cut it at the top and chop and drop the rest of the plant, because the nodules on the roots are where that nitrogen is stored, and if I leave the roots in place, then that will break down and add nitrogen to the soil. The clover is also great as a natural weed barrier and to conserve moisture in the soil because it's covering it, so it's a great living mulch. I've got toy onions here, and I have shallots here, and then on this end I've got garlic, and it's all doing so well. The garlic has gotten huge. Some of the garlic plants have kind of yellow tinged tips, and that's just a result of some of the stress from the cold weather, and so I'm not worried about that at all. It will be May before I harvest this garlic, so I am hoping that at that point I will have a very exciting report of a massive amount of garlic that I can store to use later in the year. So right next to that big garlic bed is my little tiny triangle bed, my attempt at fitting one more bed back here, and I've got my fava beans going, and I noticed yesterday that some of them are blooming, which is really exciting. These were mainly to build the soil in this bed and to fix nitrogen. This is one of the last beds that I put into the garden, and the soil was relatively poor and rocky here. So what I'll do is I'm going to harvest some of these fava beans for myself, but then I will chop and drop the upper portion of the plant and leave the roots in place, just like the clover, to fix nitrogen. I have several different varieties of fava beans in this bed. One of them is the Aqua Dolce, and the other one I got from Native Seed Search. I'm gonna have to go refer to my notes to see which one it is, because right off the top of my head I can't think of the variety, but I'll put that on the screen so that you know. They have been doing really well. I've been growing these fava beans completely unprotected, no frost cloth or anything, and it got down to 15.5 degrees Fahrenheit in my yard one night, and I thought they were goners when I came out here. They were all curled up and they looked terrible, but they rebounded by the afternoon, and they, like cabbages, are so resilient to the cold. It's so amazing. This combination bed that I shared in my space-saving video on only having 1 square foot bed is doing really well. I've got cilantro, Swiss chard, and kale, and I've got lots of carrots over here, and then peas on the other side, and spinach. I've also got some arugula and some bok choy that I let flower here, so I will just collect the seeds from that once the bees are done, and then I'll pull it. All of the cabbages are doing really well. They're starting to bulk up. I've been harvesting broccoli and romanesco and cauliflower, but I am waiting rather impatiently for these cabbages to get done. I've also got some Brussels sprouts, and those I think should be ready fairly soon, and they are just forming growing their little tiny miniature cabbage heads all along the stem. Of course, they're not cabbage, they're Brussels sprouts, but they are going to be so delicious, I think. In this bed, I've got quite a few cabbages. This is a 16 square foot bed, or 4 foot by 4 foot, and I have put a cabbage in each 1 foot square, and I've got a mixture of different ones. I just think the mix of color of them growing together is just gorgeous. Really, I'm growing this because I love cabbage, but also, who doesn't want to look at this when they come out and do their garden walk in the morning? We bought some Concord grapes. We have 4 vines, and those are a very familiar and warm memory from my childhood. My dad grew those when I was little out in his garden, and I would crawl under there on hot summer days and lie in the cool grass underneath those vines and just reach up and eat grapes until I had a bellyache. I found these vines for sale at a local garden center, so I couldn't resist snagging them and giving them a shot. So they look like they're doing really well so far. They have already leafed out and have started growing, and one of them actually has a little flower cluster on it. So we have this empty space where I am sorry to say our grapefruit tree met its end. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose with those types of things, but we already had irrigation lines here, so we decided to stick these grapevines in its spot. These vines are leafing out so prettily, but look at this little flower cluster here. Isn't that sweet? So I'm hoping that that is a good sign. And we've got 3 others here. Probably a little bit hard to see against the mulch because they're so small. Oh, look at that. There are a couple little flower clusters on that one too. And then the last one is right over here. We will definitely have to be netting these from the birds. So my husband is going to be putting up a little support system for it, a trellis, just like the ones that we have on the other side of the yard. And we will probably cover them with some sort of a netting to keep the birds and the little rodents off, the little mice and things, in case they're tempted to eat them. So I have high hopes for these, and I can't wait to share how they do later on in the season. I want to take you over to look at some of our fruit trees on the other side of the yard. All right, everyone, I am not proud of the shabby look of this corner. We have been removing a bunch of weird landscape rocks and mismatched gravel and other things over here, and the Bermuda grass is definitely making a go of it. I've got 3 Nanking cherries here. These have not produced any fruit yet. This one, surrounded by the Bermuda grass, hasn't leafed out yet for the season, but I've added 2 more. And behind them, I have a peach tree. This peach tree is covered in blossoms. It's so pretty. So hopefully I will get some fruit from this year. This is the Desert Gold Peach. Also looking quite shabby are my espalier apple trees here. So you can see I've got one of them is still covered, and I've pulled the netting off the other one, and then that one down there is covered. And there is a reason for that. So I'll show you this middle one because it's looking really pretty right now. So I have it trained. We have a turnbuckle trellis system here so that we can tighten it as it grows. And there are 4 different wires that are supporting 4 different branches for this tree. And so these blooms are looking really good, actually. Hopefully we'll get some fruit this year. But before you get too excited about the success, I want to show you this. So no, I did not prune these off. These were more spurs that should have produced flowers and then fruit, just like these guys. But that is not what happened. We have a squirrel that lives over in our neighbor's yard, and it comes over and it loves to chew on cactuses and eat our fruits and rummage through our garden, taking one bite of tomato and tossing the rest away. So he is very annoying. I'd shared on one of my YouTube shorts, maybe just last week, that the rock squirrel had come out and he had chewed all of those buds off of those spurs on the branches that I just showed you that looked like they'd been pruned, and they had, by squirrel. I had to cover up these espalier apple trees, as I said in that video, with this netting. After the tree blooms, the squirrel seems to kind of lose interest in these apple trees until the baby fruits come on. Now, last year, he didn't bother the spurs or the buds. He bothered the baby fruits. When I came out to thin those fruits, I found that he had eaten nearly every single one of them off, so that was pretty irritating. But this year, he beat me to even that, and he nibbled off all of the buds. So I covered them until they bloomed, but now as they are blooming, I have to uncover them so that the bees can get to them and pollinate those flowers. Now that the flowers are open, at least on the middle one, I have the cover pulled down. But after those flowers have been pollinated, I have got to make sure that I beat the squirrel to the scene and cover them back up so that he can't eat what fruit those poor little trees are going to produce this year. That is just how it is though. Our gardens are ecosystems and they are full of all kinds of little creatures. We are not the only ones here, so I figure we need to try to learn to cooperate with it and just put up barriers when there are things we don't want to share with them. So hopefully I will have a good report on some of these apples very soon. My row of pomegranate trees are still sleeping. I've got 6 of them, but I did notice this one actually has a few little leaves that are sprouting out, but it is the first pomegranate to do that. So just the one so far. The first little pansy bloom has popped up in this pot. I sowed some seeds in here just a couple months ago. The alpine strawberries have weathered the winter, which I'm not surprised at since they are called alpine, and they are getting little sweet little blooms on those. I am so excited about these onions that I planted. I planted 4 or 5 different varieties, and I have never planted this many onions before. Usually I will start my onions from seed and then I will transplant those out. I've got a video on starting onions, and in it I explain why I don't like to use onion sets, so I will link that below if you want to check that out. But this year I ordered onion starts, which are the little transplants from Dixondale Farms. This is the first year that I've used onion starts instead of starting from my own seeds, and I have to say I think I might be hooked. They were so much easier than trying to sow the seeds early and then transplant those tiny little things out and all of that. So they are ahead of schedule compared with the last couple of seasons. So I think that is something that I would highly recommend and that I will certainly be doing next year. So let's look at those onions. I have Texas Early, I've got Red Creole, and I have Yellow Granix here. And they're doing really, really well. I couldn't be more pleased. The other side of this onion bed has a few things growing in it. I've got a little bit of lettuce planted. There's a volunteer sweet pea at the end, but for the most part, this is going to be set aside for either more tomatoes or peppers. So I'm not too worried about things being ready to be pulled out in time for the rest of my tomatoes to move in. That lettuce that is along these edges will be quickly harvested, leaving the middle space completely open for those tomatoes and peppers. I do have along both edges another row of onions, but those can continue to develop and mature as I'm planting this middle portion of the bed. I also have some onions over here underneath this long frost cover tunnel, and I've talked about it before, but I would highly recommend these straight metal wires. I got these from Johnny's, and they are great for just bending into shape so that they can accommodate whatever bed shape you have. And then I just clip on with spring clamps or with these, just the cover, whatever it happens to be. So I can use an insect netting for this, I can use a frost cover, I could use a shade cloth. So I love being able to find equipment and tools that I can use for multiple purposes, and these certainly are that. So I will link the wires in the description below for you as well so that you can check those out for yourself. Let's peek at the potatoes. I am so excited about these. So a lot of these are doing really well. They're looking super healthy, and so I haven't mounded up any more soil around them yet, but I will, because you can see the stems here are starting to get taller. So what I'll do is I'll come in and I will scoot the dirt up around those stems to keep them covered so that more potatoes will develop along those stems. All the way along, I've got these little potatoes. Also in that bed, I have onions, which don't need the frost cover, but since they're sharing the bed with the potatoes, they're being covered too, and they're doing just fine like that. Also sharing that bed down the middle, I have some beets and carrots, some strawberries, and some beautiful lettuce. I have a mix of green and red lettuce that I planted in there just from transplants from my house. I've been trying to do a better job at succession planting this year. If you're working with a small space, succession planting is definitely a great way to maximize that. And also it's a lot more time efficient. You wouldn't think that if you have to sow seeds multiple times throughout the season that it would be so time efficient, but if you're only sowing enough lettuce for a week or two, so 5 to 10 seeds depending on how much lettuce you use, and then a couple weeks later maybe you sow 5 more seeds, that takes hardly any time at all. So I'm always starting a new tray of lettuce in the house so that every couple weeks I can set out more transplants, and we have not had to buy lettuce for 3 months, so I have been really pleased with that. Speaking of lettuce, I have this tub next to my shed sown with multiple things, including this gorgeous lettuce. So this will be the next lettuce that I'll be using for our salads over the next couple weeks, but I've got some more ready to go. I've got lots of things going on in this tub. I have lettuce, and I've got turnips, and I have peas in the back. I even have a few carrots in here. So it's a great way to max the space as well by growing vertically. And oh my goodness, I see a little pea bloom right there looking quite pretty in this morning sun. In front of the peas, I've got these turnips. These are a salad turnip. Let me see if I can give you a good glimpse of those. They are a white 2-inch turnip, and they're very sweet. Once these turnips reach about 2 inches, you can pull them and you can put them in your salads. You can roast them or do whatever it is you want to do. They're very tender, very mild, and very sweet. So those have been a real treat. And then I've got this lettuce that will be ready to harvest just at the end of this week, so I can let some of the other plants that I've been harvesting from rebound, and I can start on this lettuce here. And then hiding right in between the turnips and the lettuce are a row of carrots. A bonus in this tub are these little alyssums, which just kind of came up on their own. Aren't they pretty? I've got some red lettuce as well. That's just such a sweet combination of the red and the green lettuce with the alyssum. So in front of this tub, I've got some really old pots that I've been using forever. I'm trying some fingerling potatoes. It's a little dark in that tub because it's black, so hopefully you can see this, but these are new to me fingerling potatoes. I planted the fingerling potatoes in that tub rather than in the row with the other potatoes because they're a trial for me this year. Fingerling potatoes can take quite a bit longer than our Arizona short seasons allow, so I just wanted to try them, but I wanted to try them without having to tie up my beds for too long. I'll let you know on those. If I get a good result, I will share the harvest with you as well as the variety. I tried several different varieties of potatoes this year just to kind of trial different ones to see what worked for me in my yard. It's a little bit cooler here than in Tucson. I'm technically in zone 8B, so I'm trying to find things that work well for my climate right here. Look at all those beautiful greens. I have Swiss chard, radishes, several different kinds of kale just growing in here and looking gorgeous all together. And of course, more beets in here. And this is the lettuce that I was talking about, giving a rest while I start harvesting the other green lettuce, because I've been harvesting from this for a while, but it is not bitter at all yet. This is the pomegranate crunch and the Tom Thumb lettuce, which actually I think I've eaten all the Tom Thumb. That's a green lettuce, so this is all pomegranate crunch. All right, thank you so much for hanging out with me this morning in the garden. I will be back next month for another garden tour / update, and next week look out for the next video in our tomato growing series. It's going to be on tomato propagation, just in time to plant your tomatoes for spring. So we'll be talking about propagating tomatoes from cuttings, starting them from seed, and also as seedlings. I'm Kara from Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy gardening.